Bernie Sanders just gave his most important speech in his entire political career, and that's saying a lot considering how involved he's been in both politics and activism. So why is this the most important speech that he's ever given? Well, it's because of the topic of this speech and the timing of this speech. The topic of the speech has to do with what is democratic socialism? Well, Bernie Sanders has answered this question with bits and pieces throughout many town halls that he's done in the past. But the problem of those bits and pieces is that a lot of media news outlets like to spin his version of democratic socialism into a socialism of Venezuela or socialism of the Soviet Union. But that's not what he wants. That's not his political philosophy. And so he wanted to give a 50-minute speech about exactly what he means when he says democratic socialism, so that you know exactly what you're voting for if you vote for Bernie Sanders or against Bernie Sanders. So the topic of this speech is important. The timing of this speech is also incredibly crucial because he could very well be the next president of the United States. And the debates are coming up, the votes are coming up, and so it's really important that you understand exactly what he means by democratic socialism when he says democratic socialism. So let me show you guys just a little bit of this video, the most important part of this video, where he clearly outlines what he means by democratic socialism. But I really challenge you guys to watch the whole 50-minute speech because it is absolutely amazing. And then we're going to talk about a lot of the other parts of this speech after we watch this video. So take a look.
But now we must take the next step forward and guarantee every man, woman, and child in our country basic economic rights, the right to quality health care. The right to as much education as one needs to succeed in our society. The right to a good job that pays a living wage. The right to affordable housing. The right to a secure retirement. And the right to live in a clean environment. We must recognize that in the 21st century, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, economic rights are human rights. And that is what I mean by democratic socialism.
So I apologize about the skipping. There was a little bit of skipping in that video. It's not great audio quality either, but understand that that speech was absolutely huge. That speech was huge because now we know exactly what Bernie Sanders means when he says democratic socialism. So now when anyone adds to what Bernie Sanders means by saying he wants Venezuela socialism, that's not what he said. He clearly outlined it. Or if anyone wants to minimize what he says, he wants to get rid of Medicare, right? That's what Donald Trump has said in the past. No, that's not true. That's not what he said. He defined his political philosophy. Now, let me give you guys some outlining of the rest of the speech, because even though that was the most important part of the speech, there are parts of that speech that matter a lot as well. He compared his political philosophy with FDR's philosophy. And I love that so much because he's mentioned FDR every once in a while, but a lot of progressives have tried to push for Bernie Sanders to compare his philosophy with FDR's because FDR was such a popular president. FDR has to be probably the most popular president in all of American history. That's without a shadow of a doubt, because he was elected, I think it was 3 times, And he died in office. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it was 4 times, but he kept getting elected over and over and over again because people loved him so much. And he wasn't elected out of office. He died in office. So if he had survived, he probably would have won over and over again. And the Republicans had to come back with, well, I should say the conservatives at the time, the people who did not want the economic security and the social security that FDR had given Americans at the time, they advocated for term limits for the president because they couldn't stand someone just continuously advocating for the American people. And that, in my opinion, was the very beginnings of the establishment, the swamp, as you see it today. And that grew once when Ronald Reagan went into office. So that was really cool. He also contrasted his political philosophy with Donald Trump's political philosophy. And he framed Donald Trump's political philosophy with corporatism. And so what is corporatism? Corporatism is essentially, as Bernie Sanders has said this in a past CNN town hall, it's essentially socialism, but only for the wealthy. And so basically you give handouts to big corporations. So Donald Trump's tax cuts, for example, had loopholes. It had tons of disastrous things for both the middle class and the poor class, but it gave trillions of dollars. I think it was $1.9 trillion. No, it was more than that, I think. But it gave so much money to the top 1%. And so that, in my view, is taking from the poor and giving to the rich. It's reverse Robin Hood in a sense. And so it's socialism, but for the rich. Now, you guys know as well as, well, actually, you guys know more than anyone else that I've done multiple videos on defining democratic socialism, social democracy, capitalism, socialism, communism, free market, and so on. And I am very particular about my definitions. However, understand that there is a really good chance at this point that Bernie Sanders will be the next president. There's no doubt in my mind that he's going to be it, but from your perspective, that could be different. But he has a good chance. He has a really good chance of winning this election. And the thing is, if he does, he holds the torch for democratic socialism at this point. And yes, researchers have been defining democratic socialism as trying to attain actual socialism through democratic means. And that's not what Bernie Sanders wants exactly. Bernie Sanders' political philosophy more lines up with how researchers define as social democracy. And so now that Bernie Sanders is probably going to have the such political influence over society, period, it's important that we reconsider redefining democratic socialism. And so I want to hear your guys' comments. Should we just redefine democratic socialism to exactly what this guy means? Or should we continue advocating that Bernie Sanders clarifies that he is a social democrat and not a democratic socialism? At this point, considering how influential that speech was, I am actually rooting that we reconsider the definition of democratic socialism. But that's kind of dangerous because in that phrase, the second word is socialism, and I am against socialism. And throughout that speech, Bernie Sanders gave a very positive outlook on socialism. Not a good thing because socialism is bad. I root for capitalism, but I root for social democracy to be more specific, which is capitalism and democracy and social and economic interventions that advocate for social justice, which is more along the lines of Bernie Sanders' philosophy. But I don't know. Bernie Sanders is the political hero at this point. He holds the torch for democratic socialism, and he's defining democratic socialism to be exactly what he said in this speech. So again, guys, watch the whole speech. It's a really good speech. And make sure you listen to how media outlets spin this, because I'm going to probably be doing many videos on, more videos at least, on how media outlets are skewing what Bernie Sanders is saying throughout this speech.